It was an ordinary morning in a quiet town where everyone seemed to know each other. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft golden light over the streets, and the small shops and businesses were slowly opening for the day. The town had a peaceful rhythm, and among the most visited places in this little community was the local bank. A building with tall windows and a polished wooden door that had seen countless transactions over the years. The bank was known for being reliable, well managed, and trustworthy, and most people felt comfortable coming here with their money, trusting that it was in safe hands. Inside the bank, the air smelled faintly of paper and polish, and the soft hum of computers mixed with the quiet conversations of employees and customers. The atmosphere was calm, yet there was a sense of routine in the way everyone moved, from the tellers behind the counters to the security guard by the door. Each person knew their role, and each day seemed predictable, uneventful, and ordinary. At the center of this well-organized environment was the bank manager, a man who had worked here for many years. He was respected by his staff and customers alike, not only for his position but also for the way he carried himself. His suit was always neatly pressed, his shoes shined, and he took pride in maintaining the decorum of the bank. He believed in rules and protocols, and he expected others to respect them too. Many people admired his professionalism, but there were whispers among some staff that he could be a little strict, rigid, and quick to judge. On that particular morning, the manager was going through the usual routine, checking reports, reviewing transactions, and ensuring that everything was in order for the day. He greeted the few early customers politely but without much emotion. His mind was focused on the day's work, unaware that this morning would bring an event unlike any other, something that would challenge his assumptions, and make him reconsider how he saw people. As the clock ticked closer to mid-morning, the bank doors opened to let in a new customer. The man who walked in had a calm and confident presence, yet there was nothing immediately unusual about him. He was well-dressed, carrying himself with dignity, and holding a check in his hand, ready to deposit it. From the outside, he looked like an ordinary customer, just another person going about his business. But as he approached the counter, the scene was about to take an unexpected turn. The customers and staff who were present continued with their tasks, some glancing up curiously at the newcomer, wondering what his purpose might be. The bank manager noticed him immediately, as he always did with new customers, but he did not anticipate anything extraordinary. The manager saw a black man standing there politely, and for reasons he did not fully realize, he made a quick judgment. His mind, conditioned by years of routine and perhaps unspoken biases, began to create assumptions. Before the man even spoke, the atmosphere in the bank remained calm, with the quiet rustle of papers and the low murmur of conversations, but there was a subtle tension building that nobody could see yet. The stage was set for something surprising, something ironic, that would later be remembered by everyone present. At that moment, however, it all seemed normal, just another day at the bank, routine and predictable, with customers coming and going, and the manager focusing on his work, unaware that this ordinary morning was about to turn into an extraordinary lesson. As the black man reached the counter and prepared to interact with the manager, the story was ready to unfold. It was a story about appearances, assumptions, and the moments when life has a way of teaching unexpected lessons. In this ordinary bank, on this ordinary morning, a simple act, a man presenting a check, would lead to a chain of events that no one could have predicted. A moment that would challenge the manager's understanding of authority, respect, and humility. And so, the scene was perfectly set: a quiet, peaceful bank, a diligent manager who followed the rules strictly, and a man who, at first glance, seemed just like any other customer. Little did anyone know that this seemingly ordinary day would soon turn into a story that would be talked about for years, a story that would remind everyone watching or hearing it that life has a way of humbling even the most confident, teaching lessons in the most unexpected ways. The bank had just settled into its mid-morning rhythm when the doors opened once again, letting in a soft gust of cool air from outside. The sound of the chime above the door echoed lightly across the polished floors, and a few heads turned briefly to glance at the new arrival. Most people were accustomed to the usual customers, the familiar faces who came in to deposit checks, pay bills, or ask questions. But this man seemed different, not because of anything flashy or extravagant, but because of the quiet confidence he carried with him, a calm assurance that made people notice without him saying a word. He walked steadily toward the counter, his steps measured and deliberate, his posture was straight, his shoulders back, and his gaze forward, exuding a sense of purpose and determination. He carried a check neatly in his hand, folded just so, and he approached the bank manager with an air that suggested he expected to be treated with basic courtesy, nothing more, nothing less. At first glance, he could have been anyone, a businessman, a traveler, or just a local resident, but something about the way he held himself drew the eyes of those nearby. The bank manager noticed him immediately, and instinctively, he sized him up, like he had done countless times before with hundreds of customers. His eyes flicked to the man's appearance, noting the neat clothing, the polished shoes, and the tidy briefcase tucked under his arm. Yet beneath this ordinary exterior, the manager's mind started to wander into assumptions, fueled by years of routine, unconscious habits, and perhaps unrecognized biases. He prepared himself for what he assumed would be a simple transaction, not realizing that this seemingly ordinary man would soon turn the entire scenario upside down. The black man reached the counter and placed the check gently on the glass surface, his hand steady, revealing no sign of hesitation or nervousness. He looked directly at the bank manager and spoke in a calm, measured tone, introducing himself and stating his purpose politely. It was a simple request, to deposit the check into his account, a request any bank employee would handle routinely. But the bank manager, caught in the web of assumptions he didn't even know he was making, paused. Hesitating for just a moment, that pause was enough to make the air feel heavier, and for those watching, it was clear that something unusual was about to unfold. Around the counter, a few other customers noticed the tension, subtle as it was. They continued with their own business but couldn't help stealing glances at the interaction, sensing that this was not an ordinary banking moment. The man's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the manager's growing unease, creating a quiet suspense that no one could ignore. Even the tellers behind the counter leaned slightly forward, curious about what would happen next. The entire bank seemed to hold its breath. Without realizing it, the man, sensing nothing but normalcy, smiled faintly, hoping the transaction would proceed smoothly. He did not speak with arrogance, nor did he demand special treatment. He simply expected the same respect any customer would receive. Yet the bank manager, for reasons he couldn't fully articulate, felt a twinge of doubt, a flicker of uncertainty. Something about this interaction that made him hesitate more than he usually would. It was as if his mind had briefly forgotten the most basic rule. Treat every customer fairly and without prejudice. And so, the scene was set, a calm, confident customer, a manager unprepared for the twist of fate about to arrive, and a few bystanders unknowingly witnessing a moment that would soon become a story talked about for years. The check on the counter seemed ordinary, the man seemed ordinary, and the bank seemed ordinary, yet beneath the surface, the ordinary was about to reveal something extraordinary, something ironic, and something that would leave the manager stunned. The quiet tension in the bank hinted at the lesson that life often delivers in unexpected ways. The arrival of the customer was not just a simple banking transaction, it was the beginning of a moment that would challenge assumptions, expose biases, and ultimately teach a lesson about respect, humility, and perception. All of this was waiting, just beyond the polite smiles and routine procedures, ready to unfold in a way no one, not even the manager, could have predicted. The bank manager's eyes flicked to the check again, lingering on the amount and the name written neatly across it. In that brief moment, a flicker of doubt crossed his mind, a whisper of uncertainty that he couldn't quite explain. He had processed hundreds of checks before, never pausing like this, yet something about this one made him hesitate. Perhaps it was the combination of the customer's calm demeanor and his own unspoken assumptions, but the manager felt a small knot of tension forming in his chest. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie, and looked at the man behind the counter, trying to appear composed. "I'm sorry," he said slowly, "but I can't process this check right now." His voice was polite, professional, yet firm, leaving no room for argument. The black man blinked, momentarily surprised, unable to hide the confusion that crossed his face. He had expected a simple, routine transaction, just like any other day. And now, with one sentence, the bank manager had created an unexpected barrier. "Is there a problem?" the man asked calmly, his tone respectful but carrying a hint of curiosity. There was no anger in his voice, only a quiet insistence on clarity. The bank manager shuffled some papers, glanced at the check again, and fumbled for an explanation. It's bank protocol," he said, struggling to find the right words. "I just need to verify a few things before I can accept it." The hesitation in his voice, subtle but noticeable, betrayed his discomfort, and the air around them seemed to grow heavier. The customers nearby began to notice the exchange, their heads tilted slightly, ears perking up, as they overheard fragments of the conversation. Some exchanged knowing glances, sensing that something unusual was happening. Something about the interaction didn't feel ordinary. There was tension, irony, and the faint trace of an impending revelation, yet no one could have guessed just how dramatic the moment was about to become. The man placed his hands gently on the counter, leaning in slightly, still calm, and said, "I don't understand, sir, I am just trying to deposit this check." His eyes were steady, showing patience and confidence, as if he had already anticipated that obstacles might arise. But the manager, caught between routine, pride, and a subtle, unacknowledged bias, felt a surge of discomfort, his mind racing to justify his decision. "I'm sorry," the manager repeated, a little louder this time, "but I cannot accept this check right now." His words, though courteous, carried a finality that made the man pause. There was a long moment of silence, broken only by the soft hum of computers and the rustle of papers in the background. The tension was palpable, stretching across the counter, filling the room with an invisible weight. The black man leaned back slightly, taking in the situation with quiet composure. He could feel the judgment behind the manager's polite words, an unspoken assumption hanging in the air, yet he did not raise his voice, nor did he react with anger. There was a subtle power in his calmness, a confidence that suggested he knew something the manager did not, that beneath this ordinary transaction, the ordinary man and the ordinary bank were about to collide in an extraordinary way. The bank manager, meanwhile, felt a strange mix of unease and authority. He wanted to maintain control, to assert his position, yet every instinct told him that something about this check, this man, and this situation was off. He glanced around, aware of the eyes of the staff and a few curious customers. Their silent observation added to the pressure, amplifying the weight of his decision. And so, the refusal hung in the air, a simple word with profound consequences. A routine morning had turned into an unexpected moment of suspense, a quiet confrontation between assumption and reality. Neither party raised their voice, yet the unspoken tension was enough to make the bank feel charged. Waiting silently, the room seemed to hold its breath, knowing, somehow, that the real story was only just beginning, and that the irony of what was about to be revealed would leave a lasting impression on everyone present. The tension between the bank manager and the black man hung in the air, thick and almost tangible. The other customers glanced discreetly at the interaction, sensing that something unusual was happening. Their quiet curiosity added to the charged atmosphere, and even the tellers behind the counter paused briefly, unsure how the situation would unfold. The black man's calmness contrasted sharply with the manager's growing unease, and this contrast seemed to intensify the moment. "Sir, I don't understand," the man said gently, placing his hands lightly on the counter. His voice was calm, steady, and polite, carrying no accusation, only a quiet insistence on clarity. He had expected a routine transaction, and yet here he was, facing an unexpected barrier. The bank manager swallowed nervously, adjusting his tie, trying to maintain the appearance of authority and control. Yet he could feel the eyes of the customers and staff on him, weighing him silently. "It's just protocol," the manager replied, fumbling with a pen and some papers, as if the movement would somehow validate his hesitation. "We have procedures for verifying checks, for security reasons. You understand." His words were formal, precise, but there was an edge of discomfort underneath, a subtle recognition that he was struggling to maintain his composure. The man nodded politely, his expression unreadable, yet his calm presence seemed to draw out the irony of the situation. "I understand procedures," the black man said softly, "but I assure you, this check is legitimate, and I would like to deposit it." There was no confrontation in his tone, only patience, and a quiet strength that made the manager pause. He had never encountered a customer who exuded such quiet authority, and it made him momentarily question his own assumptions. The small knot of tension in the manager's chest grew heavier, as he searched for a reason, any reason, to justify his refusal without admitting that something deeper was at play. The black man continued, leaning forward slightly, maintaining eye contact without being confrontational. "I am simply trying to do what any customer would do, deposit this check, and I would appreciate it if you could help me." His words were courteous, yet carried an unspoken weight, a subtle hint that he was aware of the tension, and perhaps even the assumptions, underlying the manager's hesitation. Around the room, the silence of the bystanders became almost a presence in itself, a quiet witness to the unfolding moment. The manager cleared his throat, glancing down at the check again, his hands trembling slightly. I'm just following bank rules, he said, his voice betraying a flicker of frustration, not at the customer, but at the unexpected situation he found himself in. The man's calm demeanor, combined with the manager's internal conflict, created a moment that was almost theatrical in its tension, like a scene frozen in time, where routine collided with irony, and authority met unexpected humility. Rules are important, the black man said gently, but respect and fairness matter even more. His words were simple, yet carried a subtle, undeniable power. They highlighted the imbalance in the situation, yet he spoke without anger, without accusation. His quiet confidence made it clear that he was not just any customer, yet he did not flaunt it. He allowed the manager to navigate his own internal struggle, guiding the conversation not with confrontation but with calm clarity. The bank manager felt a rising awareness, a creeping realization that this interaction was no ordinary transaction. The polite, patient tone of the man in front of him contrasted sharply with the manager's growing anxiety, and it forced him to confront his own assumptions, his unspoken biases, and the fragile line between authority and respect. The conversation, though simple on the surface, had become a silent battle of perception, a subtle test of humility and awareness. Around them, the bystanders remained quiet but attentive, sensing the importance of the moment. The simple words exchanged between the two men carried more weight than anyone could articulate, and it was clear that whatever happened next would define not just the transaction, but the lesson to be learned from it. The ordinary act of depositing a check had become extraordinary, setting the stage for a revelation that no one in the room would ever forget. And so, the conversation continued, calm, measured, and deliberate, a delicate dance of words and glances, waiting for the moment when reality would finally break through the assumptions, exposing irony and truth. The scene was tense, yet oddly respectful, a quiet prelude to a revelation that would leave everyone stunned, humbled, and reflecting on the true meaning of authority, fairness, and human dignity. The tension at the counter had reached a peak. The black man's calm demeanor and quiet insistence seemed to fill the room, drawing the attention of everyone present. The bank manager shifted nervously, fidgeting with the papers, trying to maintain his composure, yet he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The more he looked at the man, the more uneasy he felt, as if something important had been hidden in plain sight. Then, almost casually, the black man leaned forward slightly, his voice soft but confident. I think there's something you should know, he said, and the simple words carried a weight that made the manager's heart skip a beat. The manager looked up, curious, cautious, unaware of the truth that was about to unfold. I am the owner of this bank, the man continued, his eyes meeting the manager's without a trace of arrogance, only quiet assurance. This check, it's drawn from my own account. A hush fell over the bank, subtle at first, but growing as the staff and customers around them realized the meaning of his words. The manager froze, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The simple act of refusing a check had turned into a moment of startling irony. The bystanders, who had been watching silently, began to murmur among themselves, whispering in disbelief. Some chuckled quietly at the unexpected twist, while others shook their heads, stunned at the situation. The man behind the counter, who had just moments ago been confident in his authority, now felt the full weight of embarrassment. The realization hit him like a sudden jolt. He had just refused the bank owner himself, without even knowing it. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. The bank manager's pride clashed with the undeniable truth in front of him. His professional authority, once unquestioned, now felt fragile and inadequate. The check that had seemed ordinary, the customer who had seemed ordinary, suddenly carried a significance that completely upended the situation. It was a lesson in humility, a powerful reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and assumptions can be dangerously misleading. The black man remained composed, his calmness almost magnifying the manager's discomfort, yet he spoke with kindness and a touch of humor. I hope this clears up any confusion, he said lightly, though the tone carried a subtle lesson. The words were polite, yet they emphasized the manager's error without humiliation, showing a rare grace in the face of authority. The manager cleared his throat, swallowing hard, and finally managed to speak, his voice slightly shaky. I had no idea, he admitted, his tone a mix of relief, embarrassment, and humility. The black man smiled faintly, nodding, as if to acknowledge the apology without dwelling on it. The tension in the room slowly began to dissolve, replaced by a mixture of amusement and admiration. The staff and customers exchanged glances, some smirking, some shaking their heads in disbelief, but all clearly understanding the irony of the situation. It was a moment that would be remembered long after the day ended. A simple transaction had turned into a story of irony, humility, and the dangers of assumptions. The bank manager, who had prided himself on his authority and professionalism, had learned a profound lesson about respect, perception, and human dignity, and the black man, despite his wealth and ownership, had handled the situation with grace and patience, demonstrating that true authority is not about asserting power, but about inspiring understanding and respect. As the revelation settled in, the atmosphere in the bank changed. The manager apologized sincerely, not just to the black man, but to himself for the assumptions he had allowed to guide his actions. The black man accepted the apology with a nod and a polite smile, turning an awkward moment into a powerful teaching moment. The customers and staff, now fully aware of the story, reflected on what they had witnessed, recognizing the lessons about humility, fairness, and the unpredictability of life. What had begun as an ordinary morning had become extraordinary. A simple act, a small check, had transformed into a story that would leave a lasting impression, reminding everyone that respect should never be conditional, that appearances can be deceiving, and that life often has a way of teaching lessons when we least expect them. And in that quiet, polished bank, on that seemingly ordinary morning, a revelation had turned the ordinary into the unforgettable. The moment of revelation had just passed, yet the atmosphere in the bank remained charged with a mixture of shock, amusement, and awe. The black man had calmly revealed that he was the owner of the very bank the manager had tried to refuse, and now all eyes were on the bank manager, whose face displayed a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. But the story wasn't over yet, for the reactions of those who had been quietly observing added another layer to the unfolding drama. The customers who had been waiting in line shifted nervously in their seats, exchanging glances filled with curiosity and astonishment. Some tried to stifle their smiles, recognizing the irony of the situation, while others whispered quietly to one another, unable to contain their surprise. Did he just? Is that really the owner? The hushed questions floated through the air, creating a ripple of intrigue that spread across the room. The tellers behind the counters had stopped their work, eyes wide, pens hovering over forms. Their minds raced to process what they had just witnessed. The manager, who had moments ago projected confidence and authority, now appeared human, vulnerable, and profoundly humbled. It was a rare and fascinating sight, a real-life lesson unfolding in front of them, one that was far more memorable than any ordinary transaction. Even the security guard by the door couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, leaning slightly forward as if to get a better view. He had seen plenty of bank incidents before, but this one was different, completely unexpected. There was no anger, no theft, no mistake in the usual sense, just a quiet, ironic twist of fate that left everyone around speechless. The bank manager's rigid demeanor softened as he realized the eyes of the witnesses were upon him, some judging, some silently laughing, and others reflecting on the moment with quiet understanding. A young woman near the waiting area whispered to her friend, "Can you believe it? He refused the owner's check." She shook her head, half in disbelief and half in amusement. The friend stifled a laugh, nodding in agreement. Talk about irony and humility. The room seemed to ripple with quiet energy, each person processing the incident in their own way. Some were amazed by the black man's calm authority, while others focused on the manager's sudden vulnerability. The bank manager, still standing behind the counter, finally took a deep breath, realizing that his pride had been misplaced, that for a few moments, he had let assumptions and biases cloud his judgment, and as he looked around, he saw the subtle, almost imperceptible reactions of the bystanders, the raised eyebrows, the smirks, the amused glances, the silent nods of approval for the black man's composed handling of the situation. It was as if the entire bank had become a silent classroom, teaching lessons about respect, humility, and the perils of judging too quickly. Meanwhile, the black man maintained his composure, smiling faintly at the subtle reactions around him. He did not gloat, nor did he assert superiority. yet his presence alone conveyed the quiet truth: authority is not about power alone, but about patience, dignity, and grace. The bystanders couldn't help but notice this contrast, the calm confidence of the man versus the flustered unease of the manager. And the lesson was clear to all who witnessed it. Some customers quietly reflected on their own assumptions, realizing that moments like these happen more often than people admit. Life has a way of humbling even the most confident, and the reactions of the bystanders showed that humor, reflection, and awe often come together when irony and truth collide. Laughter, though discreet, began to ripple quietly through the room, breaking the tension without mocking anyone. And the story that had begun with a simple transaction had now grown into a shared human experience. By the time the manager composed himself and apologized, the reactions of the bystanders had transformed from astonishment into silent admiration. The bank had returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of the moment lingered, etched into the minds of everyone present. It was a story they would remember, retell, and laugh about for years to come, a reminder that life often has unexpected twists, and that respect, humility, and patience are qualities that command far more authority than titles or positions ever could. And so, in that small, quiet bank, a simple act of depositing a check had turned into a collective lesson, with every bystander silently learning, reflecting, and marveling at the irony. The reactions of the witnesses captured the essence of the moment: surprise, amusement, humility, and a profound understanding that sometimes the most powerful lessons are delivered in the simplest, most unexpected ways. After the tension had finally settled, the bank returned to its usual rhythm, but the memory of the extraordinary moment lingered like a quiet echo. The manager stood behind the counter, taking a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. His heart was still racing, and his mind replayed the moment over and over: the polite words, the calm demeanor, and then the stunning revelation that the black man he had refused was the very owner of the bank. It was a moment that could have been humiliating, yet it carried a deeper lesson he could not ignore. He looked at the man again, who was now calmly reviewing a receipt, and realized the true meaning of the encounter. For years, he had prided himself on his professionalism, his ability to maintain authority, and his strict adherence to rules, yet in a single moment, he had been reminded of the fragility of assumptions, of how quickly pride and judgment could blind him to the truth. The manager reflected quietly on his behavior, acknowledging that his hesitation had been fueled not by procedure alone, but by unconscious bias. The black man noticed the manager's thoughtful silence and offered a gentle, understanding smile. Without words, it was not a smile of triumph or superiority, but of quiet patience, showing that authority and respect were not about asserting dominance, but about guiding others to awareness. The manager felt a mix of humility and gratitude, realizing that this brief encounter had taught him more than any training or experience ever could. As he replayed the incident in his mind, the manager thought about the other customers and staff who had witnessed the scene, how they had silently absorbed the lesson, how their reactions had mirrored the subtle power of calm composure, and how quickly respect can shift when assumptions are challenged. He understood that this was more than a personal lesson, it was a shared experience, one that could ripple out to others, reminding them of the importance of fairness, patience, and humility in everyday interactions. He reflected on the irony of the moment. The very person he had judged, the person he had unconsciously underestimated, had turned out to be someone of far greater authority than himself. Yet, instead of anger or resentment, the black man had chosen understanding and dignity, and it was this response that had transformed what could have been an embarrassing incident into a profound life lesson. The manager realized that respect, when given freely and without assumption, could create moments of learning that authority alone never could. The experience left him thinking about how often people judge others based on appearance, race, or first impressions. How many times had he, or anyone else, allowed assumptions to guide behavior instead of seeking the truth? He felt a quiet determination to be more mindful, to check his assumptions before acting, and to approach every interaction with fairness and humility. The lesson was clear: no title, position, or rule could replace the value of respect, patience, and understanding. As he straightened his suit and composed himself, the manager also realized the subtle beauty of the black man's approach. His calmness had not only revealed the truth, but also taught a lesson in human dignity. The encounter had been brief, but its impact was profound. showing that life's most important lessons often arrive in small, ordinary moments, disguised as routine tasks or daily interactions. Yet if one is attentive and humble, these moments can change perspectives, challenge biases, and inspire growth. The manager took a moment to apologize sincerely, not only for the refusal, but for the assumptions and judgments he had allowed to cloud his professional conduct. The black man accepted the apology graciously, nodding with quiet understanding, and in doing so, reinforced the lesson that forgiveness, patience, and dignity are as powerful as authority. Around them, the customers and staff continued their business. But the energy in the room had subtly shifted. The lesson was not just for the manager, it was for everyone who had witnessed the moment, a reminder of the importance of empathy, fairness, and awareness in everyday life. And as the day went on, the bank manager carried the lesson with him, reflecting on it quietly, understanding that true leadership is not measured by authority alone, but by humility, fairness, and the ability to learn from life's unexpected moments. The encounter, once tense and awkward, had transformed into a story of reflection, growth, and human understanding, leaving a lasting impression that neither the manager nor anyone present would ever forget. By the time the day drew on, the bank had returned to its usual rhythm, but something had changed. The atmosphere was no longer just about transactions, deposits, and withdrawals. It carried the invisible weight of a lesson learned. The ordinary morning that had begun with routine now lingered in the memories of everyone present as something extraordinary, a story that would be retold, remembered, and reflected upon for years to come. The bank manager, still behind the counter, moved with a newfound awareness. His steps were slower, more deliberate, and his demeanor carried a quiet humility that had not been there before. The memory of refusing a check, of hesitating in the face of assumptions, and then realizing the true identity of the man before him, replayed over and over in his mind, shaping his understanding of authority, respect, and human dignity. Around him, the black man had finished his transaction and was preparing to leave. He did so with grace, calmness, and a subtle smile, leaving behind not just a deposited check, but an invisible lesson that could not be ignored. Everyone in the bank seemed to feel the impact. From the tellers to the waiting customers, each had witnessed a quiet demonstration of humility, patience, and the power of calm composure in the face of unexpected circumstances. The manager reflected on the irony of the morning, the moment when he had unknowingly refused the very owner of the bank. He thought about how easily assumptions can cloud judgment, how quickly pride can take over, and how humility can often arrive in the most unexpected forms. That simple, ordinary act of refusing a check had transformed into a story of profound significance, teaching him a lesson that no rule or procedure could ever convey. For the customers who had watched quietly, the scene was equally unforgettable. They had witnessed a rare moment of truth, a collision of assumptions, authority, and patience that left everyone thinking. The murmurs and whispered conversations that had rippled through the bank during the incident gradually turned into smiles, quiet chuckles, and reflections. Each person began to recognize the power of respect, the danger of judgment, and the beauty of understanding. The incident quickly became more than just a local story. It was a story about life itself, about the unexpected lessons that appear in ordinary places, about the moments when humility and dignity speak louder than authority and titles. The bank, once just a building for transactions, had become a classroom, its walls echoing with lessons about perception, assumptions, and human connection. The bank manager, now fully aware of the impact, silently promised himself that he would carry this lesson forward, that he would approach each interaction with an open mind, a careful heart, and a willingness to see beyond appearances. The black man, in his quiet way, had reminded him that true respect is earned not through titles or power, but through understanding, patience, and the ability to treat others fairly. As the black man left the bank, the manager watched him go, a sense of gratitude and newfound wisdom settling over him. He realized that while the incident had been brief, it had forever changed the way he viewed people, authority, and the assumptions that so easily creep into daily life. The story of that morning, simple yet extraordinary, would remain a reminder that humility and respect are powerful tools, capable of transforming ordinary moments into unforgettable lessons. Even after the doors closed and the last customers left, the story of the check, the refusal, and the revelation lingered. It was a story that would be told and retold, shared as a lesson about human nature, assumptions, and the unexpected ways life teaches wisdom. The bank manager, the staff, and the witnesses all carried the memory forward, each in their own way, understanding that the events of one ordinary morning had become something remarkable, a story about life, learning, and the quiet power of dignity. And so, the day ended not just with transactions completed and business as usual, but with hearts and minds touched, lessons learned, and a story that would inspire reflection for years to come. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and the bank had transformed into a silent classroom, teaching the power of humility, patience, and respect in the most unexpected, unforgettable way.